I want to start off with this historic deal, a potential acquisition or takeover of Sabadell. We know this has been going on for quite some time. Sabadell says it's impossible to get a 50% threshold crossed. Is it impossible to you?
Well, first, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, Kriti. It's not only possible, we are very confident that we will surpass 50%, given the attractiveness of the offer that we have presented to Sabadell shareholders. The attractiveness is in the exchange itself, very favorable terms for the Sabadell shareholders in the exchange. Sabadell share price has more than doubled through this tender process and reaching historical highs. And it's not only the exchange terms themselves that are attractive, but the fact that there's value creation by joining forces. And the effect of both things, the attractive terms and the value creation, means that for the Sabadell shareholder, looking ahead, the profits per share, the earnings per share, are going to be more than 40% higher than what they would be in a standalone Sabadell story. So it's a much stronger project. We are the most profitable bank in Europe. We are the fastest growing bank in Europe. And with the combination, we will be even stronger with significant synergies. And this is an invitation to the Sabadell shareholders to join this growth story at very favorable exchange terms.
Well, in the past couple of weeks, you've certainly gotten plenty of institutional investors on your side ready to accept your revised offer. Is there a concern if you can't meet that 50% threshold to lower it? Is that something you've considered?
We have the legal possibility to waive the condition that we have set. So we have set a condition that in order for the deal to be successful, we should surpass 50%. Otherwise, it will not be successful. But we have, until the very end, the legal possibility of waiving that condition. We don't have the intention of so doing. And in any case, as I just said, we are very confident, we're convinced that we're going to surpass the 50% level.
But if you don't, how close to the 50% do you have in terms of wiggle room when it comes to that threshold?
Well, the legal possibility is that we can waive the condition if we are in the 30 to 50% space. Again, this is highly uncertain or unlikely. And it would be entirely up to BBVA to decide to drop the deal if we were below 50, which again, we don't think so, or to proceed waiving the condition if we are between 30 and 50.
So let's explore that legal possibility for just a moment. If you do lower that threshold and choose to go that route, you would have to make a second offer. Have you done the math on what that second takeover offer might look like?
Well, again, this is a decision that BBVA would take at the appropriate time, were that time to come, which we don't think it will come because we will surpass the 50. So it's a very hypothetical scenario. But in that hypothetical scenario, yes, of course, we would. If we were to waive the condition, we would need to launch a second offer at the same price in cash. So it would be actually what the law says. It would be the highest price BBVA would have paid in the prior 12 months. So that would be the price of this offer, just in cash. So that would be the situation. And yes, the math depends on whatever take-up happens after that. So what's the take-up in the first one and what's the take-up in the second one, given that they are the same price? So you can make your hypothesis, but again, this is very hypothetical terrain.
Well, as you can imagine, investors around the world are exploring all of the hypothetical options, especially your investors and, of course, Sabadell's investors. Is that a conversation you've had in terms of what you just laid out with the CNMV?
Of course, the CNMV has approved the prospectus, so all the options that are laid out in the prospectus, which are the ones I'm commenting, are very, very clear. Regarding conversations with investors, I think there has been some confusion in the messaging that has been coming to investors, particularly the retail ones, regarding the fact that maybe it's better to wait for a second offer. Nothing of that sort. So it makes really no sense to wait for a second offer, which would be highly uncertain because it will entirely depend first on the take-up. So if we're above 50, it doesn't happen. If we're below, it entirely depends on BBVA's will to proceed or not. And of course, we would make the decision based on our shareholders' interests always. But even if it were to come, it has no added attractiveness versus the current offer, because it would be at the same price. It would be a few months later, so why wait if this offer is on the table right now and you can seize the opportunity right now? And finally, it has a worse tax treatment because it would be a cash offer.
Well, Carlos, let's talk about some of the reasons not to take the deal. And this is something that's being floated around in terms of some of Sabadell's shareholders, which is that there has been a promise from Sabadell leadership of a special dividend to the tune of 2.5 billion euros, extra money that's come from the TSB sale that the leadership over at Sabadell has promised to the shareholders. Is that a promise you can compete with? If not now, then if the deal goes through?
Well, as shareholders know, dividends themselves represent cash back to shareholders that already owns to the shareholders. So you're only giving yourself, or you're giving your shareholders what they already own, and that's why when you pay a dividend, the stock price corrects down to on the amount of the dividend, because it's a distribution. So the focus should not be on distributions, particularly of extraordinary nature when you're selling a piece of your business, you're selling an asset. As important as TSB was for Sabadell, that generates cash that you give back. But the giving back itself is not a value-generating move. What's important for shareholders is the ability to generate dividends going forward. And that depends on the ability to generate earnings going forward. And as I said at the opening, but through this merger, the Sabadell shareholder can be part of a project that highest growth, highest profitability, that will also favorable exchange terms, value creation through synergies. The combination of all of that is a lift of more than 40% in the earnings per share. Even if you adjust for the cash back, which of course doesn't generate the earnings for the Sabadell shareholder any longer, and the excess capital on both sides, it's still a more than 15% uplift in earnings per share, which is dividend per share generating potential going forward. It's really a comparison between this project BBVA, the highest growing, most profitable bank in Europe, or a Sabadell, which will be smaller and lacking any diversification after the TSB sale.
So, Carlos, just to be clear, from what I'm hearing, does that mean you're not at the moment considering ramping up the dividend payments or ramping up some of these shareholder returns?
Well, we have, as you know, in July, the end of July, we announced very ambitious targets for 2028. Very ambitious, but that we are very confident that we will be achieving. We have a good track record of over-delivering very ambitious targets. So for 2028, 22% return on tangible equity, 15% tangible book value appreciation through the 4 years, and a total of 48 billion ex-Sabadell, so even before considering the Sabadell acquisition, 48 billion net profit in the next 4 years, and 36 billion in distributions. So yes, of course, we're going to be ramping up distributions. Those 36 have a short-term component that will come in the next few months that is amounts to 13 billion. But we're not obsessed with giving the cash back. What we're obsessed with is generating returns and growing, so we can continue to generate earnings, excess capital that we can distribute to shareholders in the future.
So let's move away from the dividends of Sabadell then and talk about the dividends over at BBVA specifically. In the scenario that we had just discussed in terms of a potential second takeover offer, there is a question of whether BBVA, amid its high profitability, has enough wiggle room, enough cushion when it comes to its CET1 ratio to actually engage in that second offer, take over Sabadell without actively impacting the dividends it's already promised to its own shareholders. Walk us through that math there. Is there an impact to dividends for BBVA should you have to face that circumstance?
So again, Kriti, now you're exploring this uncertain or this hypothetical, uncertain, unlikely scenario. As I said several times already, we are convinced, we are very confident we're going to surpass 50. So then the question would be moot. In the event we're below, it's entirely up to us. And of course, we would only make the decision if it makes sense for our shareholders. So nobody should worry about that scenario, because we could drop the condition or not, but we would only do it if it's good for our shareholders.
Well, let's consider the scenario that you are hoping for, which is, of course, that this deal ultimately does go through. If it does happen, you'll have $2.5 billion to play with when it comes to the sale from TSB. Do you have an idea of what you do with it?
Well, that would add up to on top of the excess capital we have. So it reduces the impact on capital the transaction has, and it turns it from a slightly negative number to a slightly positive number. So it adds to the 13 billion short-term excess or to the 36 billion that we would distribute in the next 4 years. And that would be the use we give to it, give it back to shareholders.
Let's talk about the leadership of Sabadell.
Sorry, Kriti. Of course, it's a decision that the board would need to make over time, but that would be the plan as we look at it today. Maybe we haven't commented on the fact that a prominent shareholder of Sabadell came out with their tendering intention, and this builds on top of what we're hearing from other institutional investors.
Well, Carlos, you took me right to where I want to go, which is the leadership and the future of Sabadell. I think you're referencing David Martinez, of course, the Mexican billionaire who has chosen to tender those offers. Just walk us through, we'll talk about the broader leadership of Sabadell in a moment, but walk us through the case of David Martinez. Is he someone you're in communication with? Is he someone you would consider to not only have a leadership position in Sabadell, but potentially at BBVA?
Well, we have had conversations with many Sabadell shareholders, and we're holding such conversations. That's why we're very confident that we have overwhelming backing from investors, institutional investors or investors of the, like David Martinez. And yes, we have had conversations with David also, but only entirely about answering questions regarding the deal, nothing about further governance questions, etc., which would be, of course, depending on the governance of the institution. So it's very early times to be thinking about any of that, and we're only talking about the attractiveness of the deal. So David's view, I think, speaks for itself. The fact that he's tendering, and he made that public because on Monday. It speaks for itself because he's a very meaningful investor. He's the largest individual shareholder of Sabadell. He's also well versed on the bank, so he's an insider. He's been at the board of Sabadell for more than a decade. Quite strategic investor, and he clearly laid out in his opinion that this deal makes strategic sense, makes financial sense, has much more growth potential and value creating potential going forward. So what is good for the largest individual investor must be good for all investors.
Well, Carlos, speaking of other institutional investors, in addition to David Martinez, walk us through how much of those tender offers you're seeing when it comes to institutional investors. Where are we in that process?
Yeah, the data is very slow in reaching us because you have the chain of custody and subcustodians, and also a lot of investors tender towards the end of the process. But we are receiving acceptances, overwhelming majority of institutionals, as I say, in the conversations we have with them. The formal acceptances will have to reach us. Regarding retail investors, the same applies regarding the slow or the incompleteness of the information as it reaches us. So unfortunately, the way this works in Spain, we will only know acceptance levels at the end of the process.
But there isn't clarity yet of the total amount that you might get where we are at this moment.
There is, exactly. That's what I meant. The information now, it's very incomplete because it trickles down the chain of custody in a very slow manner, and it's only information you can rely on at the end of the process. So my comments are not formal acceptation, but actually the messages that we're hearing in the very intense dialogue we have with investors, where we see an overwhelming majority tendering.
Well, Carlos, a final question to you when it comes to the leadership of Sabadell at the end of the day. We mentioned David Martinez. You talked about the merits of the deal. You talked about the merits of having Sabadell be a part of the BBVA empire. Some would argue that part of making that smooth transition, if this deal ultimately goes through, would be keeping some of the leadership that is already existing at the top of Sabadell. Is that a conversation you've had?
No, we haven't had that conversation. As you know, this started as a friendly merger in which we had made some provisions, which are public, or proposals regarding incorporating into our board 3 board members from Sabadell and other provisions regarding governance. But the merger proposal was rejected by the board, and that's when we decided to extend the offer directly to the Sabadell shareholder. And that's a share exchange proposal to the shareholders directly, and there is nothing regarding conversations or provisions around how to deal with the governance of the institution. We will discuss that after the fact, and yes, we will do so in a way that maximizes value in the integration process to do it as smoothly as possible.